I heard someone ask a touring pro one time, what do you do before you get out on the water? How do you prepare? How are you able to go out on a lake that's thousands of acres and find those few spots that hold heavy concentrations of fish? Well, the pro was pretty quick with his answer. He told the guy, I study maps. He said if there are 3 different maps for the lake, I want all 3. There's a saying in the bass fishing world, when it comes to dissecting a bass fishery, it's not about finding the good water, it's about eliminating the bad. Standard map study can help you do just that by giving you a detailed overview of the entire lake. But for this video, I'm going to assume that every one of you has done map study to prepare for a day's fishing. What I'm going to show you is a unique set of tools, not papers, that will give you an unparalleled look at your body of water. I feel confident that many of these tools and the hidden features within these tools will be completely new to you. And I'm excited to be able to share with you what I've learned about them and how they've impacted my success. So, let's get started. All the tools I'm going to share with you are either software applications you need to have installed or web applications that you view online through your browser. They're completely free, and along the way I'll provide the URLs to the websites where you can download and or access these tools and features. We've also created a page at www.bassfishing.com/mapvideo1 that provides all the links and downloads that we show. So feel free to watch this video without interruption, then afterwards visit that page for an overview of this video with all the related links. The first thing I want to talk about is virtual globe software. Now, many of you are already very familiar with this category of software, having used the most notable virtual globe application, Google Earth. If you're familiar with Google Earth and have used it many times, good, because I don't want to spend time making this a tutorial on what it is and how to navigate within it. I want to get right to the good stuff that's relevant to anglers using this software. But don't worry if all this stuff is brand new to you. You'll be able to quickly pick up on how it works, and at the end we'll provide resources for learning more about these applications. And shortly in this video, we're going to be also covering some very interesting features with other applications provided by NASA, GeoGarage, Microsoft, and more. You'll quickly realize that no one application gives you what you want, but by combining all these tools and being able to make sense of them, you have access to powerful information that will allow you to become a better angler. So let's kick things off by diving into Google Earth. First things first, if you don't have Google Earth, simply go to Google and type in Google Earth. It'll be the first listing at the top, and see this blue button here? Go ahead and click that to download the Google Earth installer to your desktop. You're going to want to close all your browsers, run the installer, and after that, after installation is complete, you'll be able to launch the Google Earth application. And here we are at what's commonly termed the blue marble. At this point, we can venture to pretty much any part on the Earth using either keyboard or mouse. The navigation functions within Google Earth are outstanding, but like I said, I'm not going to cover navigation. I want to get right to the stuff that's related to bass fishing. We'll provide some resources and at the end that do a great job explaining how to use the mouse and keyboard to navigate quickly inside this software. Before we begin, I'm going to want you to do a couple things so that both you and I are in sync. Google Earth by default has a lot of stuff turned on that isn't relevant to us at this moment, and it's only going to clutter the screen and slow things down. So for now, I want you to collapse this search panel and get it out of the way so we can see the more important stuff easier. Also, you're going to want to uncheck pretty much everything down in the layers panel except for the borders and labels and terrain. Both I leave on pretty much all the time. You're going to want to check out the other stuff later, but for now, it's just all the other stuff is just going to clutter the screen and slow us down. So just borders and labels and terrain, and we'll be set. So just to give you an example of how you can perform some basic fishing reconnaissance, let's zoom into a spot on the Potomac River in Maryland named Piscataway Creek. I already have this spot queued up here in my Places panel, so let's go ahead and zoom in on it. Okay, so here we are at Piscataway Creek on the Potomac River. You'll notice that there's a marina right here, and that's Fort Washington Marina. This is a marina I've been launching to for many years, and so I'm very familiar with these waters. You can see as I move around and browse the creek that the satellite imagery in Google Earth is very detailed, even at these low altitudes. There's a lot to look at and a lot you can learn from. Let's go ahead and zoom out so we can view this creek again in its entirety. Immediately you can see that Google Earth's imagery tells a story about this creek. Because this is a tidal river, current flow is very evident in these pictures. You can see that some of the water looks very muddy, and some of the water is green, which represents clear water. Now, as an example, I know from experience that the Potomac River bass shut down pretty hard when the river muddies up from recent heavy rains. And when that happens, the key is to search the river to find those areas that still have some clear water that the bass can ambush prey in. Now, if I'm going to be fishing on a day where I know the river just muddied up, I can use Google Earth beforehand to find definitive areas where the water will be clear because of tidal flow and bottom contours. Because this is a tidal river, things can be drastically different depending on which tide we're looking at. So first thing I need to do is determine by looking at this imagery if the tide is incoming or outgoing at this very moment. At first glance, it's difficult to tell, but there are a few giveaways that tell me that this tide is outgoing in these satellite images. Take a look at the eastern end of this cove right here. You'll see that the outgoing tidal flow is hitting that small secondary point head on, and the silt is being swept out and over it, telling me the current is going from right to left, an outgoing tide. If you take a look at the back of Piscataway Creek, you'll also notice a small feeder creek that is dumping fresh, clear water into the muddy backwaters of the main creek. We can be reasonably confident that this too points to an outgoing tide. So knowing what we know now about this creek just from a few quick observations, I now have some clues where I can find some clear water in this creek if I'm going to be fishing in potentially muddy conditions. So let's say I plan on flipping the pilings and docks at Fort Washington Marina. Using Google Earth, I can see that there will very likely be clearer water around the middle boat slips on each pier. I know from experience that another very popular and productive spot here in Piscataway Creek is this first small cove at the north mouth. You can see that the back part of this cove is staying clearer than the rest of the creek because of the protection from the outgoing mud by this small secondary point. If I zoom in here, you can see that there's all kinds of visible cover, most notably laydowns along the shoreline. You'll also notice if you come up here that there's an interesting piece of cover that looks man-made. Also, because the current is being blocked and a mud line is created, it would be worth checking out this secondary point here. So as you can see, Google Earth can be a very valuable tool for finding potential fishing spots and analyzing water in various conditions. Let's now take a look at some other useful features in Google Earth for anglers. Here we are back at Piscataway Creek on the Potomac. One thing I've noticed is that when looking at the water from a direct overhead view, it's hard to visualize what you see here with what you'll see when you get out on the water. One thing that can make it easier for you is to look at the water in Google Earth at a more natural perspective. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. If you hold down the Shift key and then hold down your mouse button, anywhere you drag the mouse will then change your plane of perspective within Google Earth. Now this is extremely valuable because if you're out on the water and you're trying to recall what you saw out in within Google Earth, your mind's going to have a hard time syncing that up and trying to match up what you're seeing in real life to what you saw here. But by looking at things in a more natural perspective, you're much better able to recall this information and visualize it in your head when you're out on the boat. A very helpful feature for anglers inside Google Earth is what's called virtual touring. If you're going to be exploring new bodies of water or new areas, virtual touring will allow you to make a quick flyover to see what's there and if any visible cover or structure is available. It's the most effective method for exploring new areas without having to motor around it for hours on end. Let's take a virtual tour of Piscataway Creek here. You'll need to create what's called a path by clicking this button here. As you can see, it says Add Path. It'll bring up a dialog and give it a name. We'll name this one Piscataway Tour. Alright, and another thing you want to do is click Style and Color, and what I like to do is just drop this opacity value down to 30%. Opacity is just another word for transparency. Now before you click OK, just go ahead and drag this window out of the way so you can begin creating your path. With creeks like this, I like to draw a path just inside the shoreline. Let's go ahead and do that. And a rough outline is really all you need. It doesn't have to be perfect, especially for demonstration purposes like we have here. I'm just going to go ahead and finish off with a real rough outline on the south shore. Okay, so when you're done drawing your path, just bring that window back into view and click OK. So now we have a path that will allow us to sit back and take a tour of this creek's shoreline. To start the tour, all you have to do is highlight the path you just created in your Places panel and click the play button. Now, here is why this feature is so valuable. First off, it allows you to cover lots of water at a perspective that will make this imagery easy to remember when you're out on the water. Remember, your mind has a hard time matching up imagery that's viewed at totally different perspectives. So you'll find that by looking at the water from a lower vantage point, it'll give you a greater level of familiarity with your surroundings when you're out on the water. Also, as we go around, you can see cover and structure quite easily. You can make notes about laydowns and other wood cover and structures such as points and mud lines and so on. It's really like doing a flyover in an airplane. To stop the tour, simply hit the stop button in your Places panel. Now I should mention that when you hit play, your altitude and field of perspective may be different than what you're seeing here on mine. In fact, it probably will be. So what you'll need to do is set up an altitude and camera angle for your virtual tours that you think gives you the greatest vision. You do that by going to Tools and then Options, and then click on this Touring tab right here. And you'll need to set your touring and camera settings in here. You can get the same settings as me just by copying these values into yours. Before we move on to some of the hidden goodies and add-on features with Google Earth, I really want to stress the importance of being able to look at things from more natural perspectives. You need to get out of the habit of viewing everything from a direct overhead vantage point. Your mind won't be able to sync it up with what you see out on the water. I'm going to keep using Piscataway Creek as our example because I want you to get a feel for how different things look viewed from different angles. Real quick, let me just show you what I will do to look at a particular shoreline I'm interested in checking out. Let's go ahead and use this first cove here on the north end of Piscataway Creek as an example. Just kind of keep in mind the angles you're seeing me navigate with and the different functions that I'm using to look around. We're going to come back to Google Earth in a bit, but we've covered it enough now to see that it has major advantages. But it does have some drawbacks. Google Earth is nothing more really than photos. It's satellite imagery. As anglers, we're used to topographic charts with contour lines. Contour maps are pretty simplistic, but they do provide a much more informed look at the lake bottom. So is there a way to get the best of both worlds? Is there a way to get those topographic maps in addition to the stunning satellite imagery? The answer is yes. Here are the best methods to view contour charts in Virtual Globe software. So how can we get all these same features and functionality out of Google Earth, but instead of using satellite imagery, use topographic maps instead? To do this, you need to download an add-on. So open up your browser and go to http://ge.gbif.net/gbifwmslinks.php. We'll have it listed in our additional information at the end. But anyway, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility offers something called a KML file that overlays USGS topo charts on Google Earth. A KML file is basically just a data file that Google Earth can read. You need to download the one for the United States, which is the second link here, and it will ask you whether you want to save the file or open it. It might just say run instead, depending on what browser you're using. If you have Google Earth, just click run or open. When you open the KML file, it will open Google Earth and add a new section to your Places panel under Temporary Places. You need to move that from your temporary places. Just go ahead and click and drag and move that up to My Places. That way, when you go to close Google Earth and restart it later, it'll still be there, because the temporary places, like it says, it's only temporary. It only kind of saves it for that one session that you're using Google Earth. This way, it's saved on your computer. Another thing you'll want to do, because it's named something that's not too identifying, go ahead and right-click on it, click Properties, and change it to something more familiar. I like USGS Topo Maps. Okay, and go ahead and click OK. All right, so here we are. We have the topo maps available for overlay on Google Earth. Before we begin, click on the new layer we have, the USGS topo maps, and expand that group. And you'll see that there's a subset called aerial photographs. Click on that, and actually right-click on that, and click Delete. We're not going to need that. That's only going to slow us down, and the aerial photographs that comes with this is nowhere near as good as the stock imagery that Google Earth uses. So go ahead and just twirl that back up again, and we're good to go. Now for demonstration, let's go ahead and get back to Piscataway Creek. So let it zoom in here. Okay, now that we're back at Piscataway, turn on the topographic map overlay by putting a check mark next to your newly created layer here, USGS Topo Maps. What that'll do is it'll refresh the screen with the USGS Topo Maps overlaid the satellite imagery. Give it some time to kind of refresh here. As you can see, this overlays an incredibly detailed contour map over the Potomac River. Right here in Google Earth. In fact, this contour map is better than any paper map I've found for the Potomac, so I'm sure there are a lot of Potomac River anglers right now with open mouths. You can see the extreme accuracy of this overlay by checking or turning off and on the check mark for the USGS topo maps. You'll notice that it matches the satellite imagery almost dead on. Now we're starting to get cooking. Being able to use both satellite imagery and topo maps is opening up a new dimension for us. But there is one problem. The topo map overlay functionality I've just shown you is a bit sluggish, and depending on the day you're trying to use it, it can be non-responsive and just act a bit wonky. But there is an alternative piece of software out there that does an absolutely fantastic job with these USGS topo maps. It's called NASA Whirlwind. NASA Whirlwind is Google Earth's biggest competitor, and at the surface it offers the same functionality. But when dealing with topographic contour information, it's above and beyond Google Earth. Let me show you what I mean. Luckily, NASA Whirlwind is open source and free of charge for us to use. So go to Google and search NASA Whirlwind Download. It'll be the first link at the top. Okay, and what you're going to need to do is just click this white graphic here to download Whirlwind to your desktop. Close your browsers and be sure to close Google Earth if you have it open before installing the application. After it's installed, go ahead and run NASA Whirlwind. It'll look and feel very similar to Google Earth. The navigation is familiar and it's very responsive. Now, let's zoom into Piscataway Creek here. So we can get kind of a one-to-one comparison of what the imagery looks like as compared to Google Earth. Okay, now you'll immediately see that the quality of the satellite pictures is pretty crummy so far. And that's a couple of reasons why. And first off, it's because of its default imagery setting. It uses this NLT Landsat 7, which is just an awful image for close-up. So you're going to want to go ahead and turn that off. So just click on this little layer here. This is where you set your images. Click on that. That'll say, okay, we're not overlaying anything on the Earth right now. So turn that off. You'll never use that. Now with NASA Whirlwind, you have choices as to what kind of imagery you want to look at. Unlike Google Earth, which doesn't give you such an option. By clicking on these layer buttons, you're able to turn on and off different sets of imagery. There are only two sets of satellite imagery that are really any good for our purposes, and they are the USGS Digital Ortho and the USGS Urban Area Ortho. The Urban Area Ortho is the most comparable to Google Earth in terms of image quality, but its coverage is restricted mostly to urban areas. Now, the Digital Ortho imagery is far more reaching, but generally is a lesser quality than what you'd find in Google Earth. But go ahead and turn on this Urban Area Ortho, which is available for this area here on the Potomac River. How do you go about overlaying those same topographic contour maps over this satellite imagery? Well, that's where NASA Whirlwind really shines. You want to turn off any current imagery layers you have on. So go ahead and turn off the one I just told you to turn on, the Urban Area Ortho. Turn that off. And the one next to it, turn that on, the USGS Topo Maps. Go ahead and click that. These are the same contour maps we saw on Google Earth, but you'll notice that its delivery is much snappier and it's overall a cleaner presentation. Let's take a look around here. The detail of these topo maps are astounding. I have never seen a paper map of the Potomac River with this much detail. You'll also notice that unlike in Google Earth, you can zoom in as far as you want on these topo maps and maintain that topographic information. Look at the detail here. Just panning around, showing you all this detail. This is really what separates the USGS contour maps compared to those you would find often in paper form for navigation or nautical use. So as you can see, Whirlwind is bar none the better topo map delivery software. It's crisper, snappier, and just much more of a joy to work with for these purposes. Another great advantage is the use of these layer buttons up top that allow you to switch back and forth between the topo maps and the urban area digital satellite imagery. This is a great benefit, something that happens much quicker than what you had inside of Google Earth. But one thing you are probably noticing is the lack of depth soundings, the numbers telling you how deep all the contour lines are. So how would one go about looking at a topo map that overlays satellite imagery, but has the contour lines numbered for depth and feet? Well, there is a way, and it's a pretty cool one. Switch out of NASA Whirlwind for a second and open up your browser. There's a company named GeoGarage that hosts geospatial imagery for digital mapping requirements. In other words, they specialize in taking one set of geospatial data, like maps, and overlaying it over other geospatial data, like satellite imagery. It's a service that's none too cheap, but lucky for us, Angler, they provide a couple demos to potential clients, and one of those demos is particularly useful. So to get the demo we want to use, just type in your browser in the URL box, type in demo.geogarage.com/NOAA and go to that address. Now you'll quickly see the coverage of these NOAA nautical charts. It's pretty much limited to the east and west coasts, and it doesn't extend too far inland, but for those of you on the coast, it's certainly worth checking out. I've kind of fast forwarded here and zoomed in already to Mattawoman Creek on the Potomac River, just to show you how this works. Mattawoman is generally the launch point for all the major tournaments, be it FLW or Bassmaster. GeoGarage uses the Google Maps API to perform these overlays. But here you can see that we have a more typical nautical chart with day markers and buoys, marked obstructions, navigational hazards, and most importantly, depth soundings. Now this is very similar to the paper maps you'll find for the Potomac River. They have far less contour definition than USGS topo maps. These are NOAA maps, so they place greater emphasis on navigation than topography. But here's a feature of GeoGarage that is extremely powerful. You'll notice that it allows you to lower the opacity of the topo map. And take a look at that. So that way you can see both the map and the satellite imagery below it. With this, you get the best of both worlds. Something you definitely can't do with plain paper maps or do easily with the aforementioned virtual globe software like Google Earth or NASA Whirlwind. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and just lower the opacity just a tad more so you can just barely see what's underneath. I think when you lower it a lot, you get a lot more out of it because it doesn't take much to see the numbers, and you really don't need to see them very clearly as long as you can see them. Let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit and go up to Piscataway Creek, the creek we've been looking at this pretty much the whole time. It's right here. And just to give you an idea of what it looks like with these NOAA map overlays, it's just such a really cool system. Let's see if we can zoom in one more here. Okay, like I said, sometimes you have to zoom out to get the map. There's a certain zoom level that works. But you can see here exactly all that information overlaid on top of the satellite imagery. This is some really powerful stuff. It'll give you the best of both worlds. As you can see, NASA Whirlwind and GeoGarage do a much better job when viewing these contour or topo maps. But both these can't compete with Google Earth in terms of satellite image quality. So is there anything out there that does provide better satellite images than Google Earth? And the answer to that question is yes. So fire up your browser. I'm going to have you download a plugin for NASA Whirlwind that will allow you to often get photos of much higher resolution and at closer distance than what you'd normally find in Google Earth. So let me show you. Just go to Google and type in NASA Whirlwind Virtual Earth. And it'll be your first listing at top, Virtual Earth Whirlwind Wiki. Click on that. This is the plugin you want to download for Whirlwind. Just download the exe file using the link at the bottom, and close Whirlwind if you have it open, run the installer, and when you're done, open Whirlwind back up. Now in order for this plugin to work, you need to sort of load it into Whirlwind by going to Plugins, Load Unload, and at the bottom of this list, you'll need to place a check mark next to Virtual Earth Plugin, and you'll also need to click the Load button here. Let's go ahead and close this. You'll notice that you have a new button up top named Microsoft Virtual Earth. It's the Microsoft logo. Now what this plugin does is allows you to view any spot you're looking at here in Whirlwind within Microsoft's Virtual Earth, which is yet another web-based satellite imagery application. So let's go ahead and set this up to test it out. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and zoom into a spot here that I think will be a good example to show you how this Microsoft Virtual Earth plugin within NASA Whirlwind works. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a place called the Spoils on the Potomac River. It's just north of Piscataway Creek, the creek we've been working with a lot throughout this video. So let's zoom in here, and I think this will be a good example to show you the power of the Virtual Earth imagery as compared to NASA Whirlwind and Google Earth. Go ahead and click on the Microsoft Virtual Earth button. You'll get a dialog with a bunch of stuff, but you'll need to change one setting before proceeding. Put a mark next to aerial here. It's probably set by default on road, so just put it to aerial. And then click the button Open in local.live.com. You'll notice that it opens your browser and takes you to the Virtual Earth website at Microsoft. It's the same location we were looking at in Whirlwind. If you don't see this satellite imagery, it may be because you're on road, so you might have to click aerial to pull up this satellite imagery. So how do you get higher res images using Virtual Earth than with Google Earth or NASA Worldwind? You need to click the bird's eye at the top. Watch. Wow, what a difference. Of everything we've seen, these images are without a doubt the most detailed and highest resolution. Nothing compares. In fact, these images I don't even think are from satellite. I believe they're aerial photography, probably shot from an airplane. Let's zoom in here to see some of these spots and take a look at the level of detail and sharpness. You can really see the difference and amazing quality this bird's eye view provides. Let's go back down for a second, take a look. Close this up to give us a little more viewing area. You can even see that there's two guys here on the deck of a bass boat fishing, and another bass boat not too far behind with a guy on the front deck. A big plus because these photos are not taken from a direct overhead vantage point. For kicks, let's travel back to Fort Washington Marina in Piscataway Creek and take a look at that at bird's eye view here within Virtual Earth. That'll give us a good idea compared to what we've been used to seeing here in within Google Earth and NASA Worldwind compared to here in Virtual Earth using the bird's eye feature. Let's go ahead and click bird's eye to get that bird's eye view. Wow. This is about as solid as an example as any to the profound difference in quality that you can gain by using Microsoft Virtual Earth's bird's eye. Unbelievable. Let's take a moment to look around using bird's eye for a second. As you can see, it's amazing quality, unmatched by the other mapping software such as Google Earth. Let's just look at one more example here. I think this Virtual Earth bird's eye view is just absolutely outstanding for fishing reconnaissance. This is the Woodrow Wilson Bridge separating Maryland and D.C. on the Potomac River. Let's go ahead and take a look. Bird's eye. Wow. Look at that, folks. Look at the clarity and the definition. Zoom in here. I mean, you can see the cars and the trucks going, and you can even see people. Unbelievable. Very responsive as well. You'll notice that there's very little lag. Very cool. Microsoft's Virtual Earth is one of the most valuable tools in your digital mapping arsenal, and the plugin for Worldwind will help you bridge that gap between a true virtual globe software and the web-based Virtual Earth bird's eye photography. We've covered quite a bit, but really we've only begun to scratch the surface of all the uses and possibilities here. Let me show you some more applications and added functionality within the software. Jumping back into Google Earth, a new feature that was recently added was the addition of a digital weather layer, thanks to the folks at weather.com. All you do is place a check mark next to weather in your layers panel, and you'll see that you're given a live Doppler radar overlay. As an example, you can see that there's currently some weather over the state of Michigan. And what's great about this is you can zoom in and figure out where you're going to be fishing, and you have access to local weather stations. If you click on the weather station, it'll give you all the statistics that are important, your wind speeds, your pressure, even future forecast projections. It's just a great way for anglers to quickly get an idea of what the weather is around those areas, what the current radar map looks like, and all this stuff is real time, so it's great value to anglers. Let's turn off the weather layer for a moment and zoom back into Piscataway Creek on the Potomac River. Okay. Another new feature I find useful as an angler is what's called the time of day feature, and you activate it by clicking this small sun icon here in your toolbar. What it does is it simulates the position of the sun and the angle of the light across the viewing area. The slider at the top is the 24-hour time period for the current date, and you can drag the slider back and forth and move the sun and the light so it matches the actual effects of the light at those times of day. To give you a better look, I'll get real close to the ground and look up at the sun so you can see how this works exactly. Okay, so there's the sun. Now watch what happens when I move this slider. As it goes on in the day, you'll notice the sun actually sets in the west. And what it does is the light that's being emitted from this point actually drapes itself across the terrain from that angle. And we'll see if you pull things back, you can see where the sun actually sits during that day's span. And you can see how in the morning the sun will rise at that certain point. Now, here's the real cool deal. You can use this feature to tell where the shaded shorelines are at certain times of the day, like in the morning or night. Google Earth very accurately represents the Earth's terrain, and this time of day feature will appropriately cast shadows on the far ends of the terrain opposite of the sun. These spots will tell you where the shade and low light water will be for things like topwater fishing, or you can find the spots that the sun hits first to know which areas will warm up quickest in the colder months. Let's just take a look around here to give you an idea. As you can see, we have a much shaded back end to this terrain, and let's zoom around here. And you can see it's much brighter on this end that the light's hitting. So using this data, you can see this spot would be warming up first during sunrise, whereas in the back, this portion of water will stay shaded much more and stay darker. So, in the summer, this might be a better spot to focus on as topwater later in the morning. And in the winter, you might want to check out this side to get the warmer water. Let's turn off this time of day feature and zoom back out so we can view Piscataway Creek in its entirety again. One last feature I'll show you guys is a plugin called WaterWatch. I know I've been kind of sticking around the Potomac for most of this video, but I did that so I could give you a point of comparison for all these different applications. Let's go to our browser again and search in Google WaterWatch, one word, and click on the first listing at the top. And at the bottom of this page, you'll see a link for Google Earth KML. You click that and open the file to Google Earth. The one you want is this bottom link here. This is the refreshable version of the KML file. So when you click on it, just open it up in Google Earth. And you'll notice that it adds in your temporary places folder real_us-1.kml. This is the stream gauges KML file. Now, what you're going to want to do is basically the same thing we did with the USGS topo maps. You want to take this out of the temporary places, so just click and drag and put it into My Places. That way it's not temporary to this session of Google Earth. When we reload Google Earth later on a different day, it'll be there on our hard disk ready to use. Another thing I'll do is I'll just change the properties and give it a name, something more familiar. So stream gauges, that's fine. Okay, we can just expand this group. You'll notice that it zoomed us out to the blue marble here, so let's reset things to the US. And you'll also notice that there are thousands of colored dots everywhere. These dots symbolize all the Corps of Engineers stations that provide real-time pool elevation and current storage data. So let's zoom in to Sam Rayburn Reservoir, without a doubt one of the most popular bass fishing lakes. And I already have it queued up here. Let's zoom right in. Okay, here we go, Sam Rayburn Reservoir. Rayburn has a station at the south side of the lake where the river is, and you'll notice this little colored dot that you can click to pull up real-time station data. Now at a quick glance, you can see the current lake level and timestamp of that readout, but what is really nice is when you click on the station ID number. Google Earth has a built-in browser that will automatically load that station's data and information, and it allows you to view and create graphs of both recent and historical water readings. Let's go ahead and close this browser up. If you zoom out, you'll notice how wide of coverage this plugin covers. It's such a neat feature that you can use right before you hit the water to get your lake levels and such. Plus, you don't have to bother those poor men and women that field the thousands of phone calls each day from anglers wanting the latest pool updates. I hope you can see the potential within these applications. The best news is that new features and functionality are being created and added every day. Google's just began to receive images from its newest satellite in space, which promises unparalleled image quality. And those images will be steadily added to the Earth system and should be available very soon. So there's much to be excited about as an angler within the realm of all things geospatial. Let me present a question to you. Imagine for a moment that you've been selected to fish in a Bassmasters Classic, and the Classic will be held sometime next week on a lake that you've never fished before. The rules state that you have 3 days of practice, and it's day 1 of that practice period. What is your pre-fishing strategy? What are you going to do once you get out on that lake for the first time? When potentially millions of dollars are on the line for one single tournament, 3 measly days of practice seems like nothing. You better make the most of it, right? So you hit the water with this fire burning on the inside of you. You tell yourself, I'm going to make more casts today than I've ever made before. I'm going to change lures constantly until I find what lures the fish are biting on. I'm going to experiment with lure colors, lure sizes, and cover lots of water quickly and find those spots that the fish are holding on. Repeat this over 3 practice days and maybe, just maybe, you'll find a winning game plan come kickoff. Does this sound like a strategy you'd employ for your practice period? Well, if it does, let me share with you a quote from Kevin Van Dam in a Bassmaster article about how he pre-fishes events. Quote, "We have 3 days to practice. I spend the first day looking around the lake. I want to know what's there, what's available, and maybe what I haven't seen before. I may fish some, but not a lot." Now, here's a guy who's the best at what he does. He puts everything on the line at every event, and he's willing to hardly fish, if at all, on one of the 3 practice days. If this doesn't make a case for the importance of exploration, I don't know what does. But you and I aren't dealing with multi-day tournaments every other week. If you take off work to go fish a lake you've never been to before, do you take off 3, 2, or even 1 day to pre-fish? No, of course not. It's game day the moment you hit that new lake for the first time. There is no practice period. That's where the tools we've shown you here will give you that edge you need to do well. You're not going to want to motor around the lake for hours to explore. You want to start casting and catching right away. But with Google Earth, NASA Whirlwind, GeoGarage, Virtual Earth, and all their hidden features, there's a case to be made for virtual exploration, and sometimes that can be even more valuable.